Right, let's bring in a man who does not miss, Radio 2GB host Luke Grant.
Hi,
a lot
Peter.
of anger here, a lot of support for veterans, Luke.
Yes.
What's your take?
Well, look, I watched your interview last night. What a great, passionate Australian your guest was. And you could hear the passion, couldn't you? And to some extent, the desperation in his voice. And it's an issue you touched on before. It's consistency. And even going back to last night's show, Peter, making the appropriate decision, making the right decision in favour of the majority, or the quiet, if you will, Australians. Now, I don't know what politician doesn't get this. We think Anzac Day is probably our most important day. I'd say that's the case for the majority of Australians. And the idea that, we've got a bit of a thing, we just better be careful and not hold it, but we'll hold tennis and cricket and all sorts of other protest marches and gatherings, that's offensive. Imagine if the armed men and women, and not all of them are in their 80s or 90s, as was pointed out to you last night, many of them are younger. Imagine if they got to the theatre of war and said, oh, gee, it's a bit hot today, I might just stay inside. Or we might get crook out there. For goodness sake, have a crack.
And I think that they can march. If we can have Parliament sit with social distancing, which we've had, surely we can have veterans march with social distancing, maybe do away with the crowds like they're doing in New South Wales. But if anyone's going to follow rules, it will be ex-servicemen and women. So I think this is a cop-out, and I think it's part of a broader move constantly to denigrate our national symbols, particularly things like Anzac Day. We know after Australia Day, it's next on the hard left's hit list. So we'll watch all of that closely. Hopefully there'll be some reconsideration. The PM today was out at CSL. This is the big pharmaceutical giant in Melbourne that's making the vaccine, the AstraZeneca vaccine. There seems to be a fair amount of confidence, Luke, that they'll be able to be nimble enough to cope with all the various mutations of this virus, including what we're seeing in the UK and South Africa. This clearly is going to be incredibly important, because we're not in a situation here in Victoria where contact tracing is doing the job that we're seeing in New South Wales. So Victoria is basically now, I think, falling back to the vaccine or bust to get back to normal.
Sounds like it, doesn't it? Interesting, I was reading a paper from Dr. Alexandra Phelan. She's an Australian working in America, and in this space has spent the last year doing all sorts of research, and she's expert. And she talks about this UK variant. And she, in fact, today suggested that this variant might be 30 to 50% more transmissible. And it actually works in advance of contact tracing. So if you've got really, really good contact tracing, you're half a chance. If there's a hole in the system, then it'll get you before it gets, before your contact tracing can catch up. Intriguing. But how wonderful, Peter, that we've actually got the medicine or the vaccine produced in this country. I mean, forever and a day we've been saying, oh, Australia, we don't make anything anymore. We buy it all from overseas. And the thing we talk about is Australian quality, the cleanliness of our farming practices, our waters. It's all pristine. And here we are, maybe out of all of this, a glimpse into our manufacturing future, if we can turn our manufacture of this virus into something really significant on the world stage. And, all ticks to the government. They haven't been panicked into putting it out to the people straight away. They've let all the scientists do their work. It'll be here, I think, next week or the week after. Then we produce our vaccine here. Wow, as we often say, you wouldn't want to get crook anywhere else, would you?
Look, I agree with that. As long as we can get our energy mix right and keep the lights on for our manufacturing, I'm all for it.
Yes.
Interesting, and I've got to go to this issue too about Victoria's Belt and Road deal with China, because very interesting statistics. I know it's a busy day on COVID, but I can't let this pass and not remark on it, because the Victorian trade deficit with China has actually worsened since the Premier signed the dodgy Belt and Road deal with the communist regime back in October 2018. ABS statistics, these Australian Bureau of Statistics out today, say Victoria has imported $42 billion more in sort of the trade account from Beijing than Victoria exported. So the only justification you could give us that we were going to win out of this deal, now the stats are out, we're actually the losers, plus if you're a Victorian, your Premier has signed away your sovereignty to China.
Wow. You can imagine, can't you? In all parts of China, they mention the word Australia and politicians just start laughing. And then they mention the word Victoria and then it becomes hysterical. I mean, wow. Well, haven't we been dealt a pup here? The states shouldn't be able to do these deals. Sorry, they shouldn't. It's a federal responsibility, foreign affairs. States get out of it. And please, can we start to understand this is not about Chinese people, the Chinese government. You'd look to find something positive about them. Sadly, I can't see a thing, a single thing.
I have to say, you know, the Prime Minister governs for the entire country. I think Victorians feel a little bit abandoned tonight. His language on your partner station 3AW with Neil Mitchell this morning was pretty soft on these potential COVID lockdowns, which we now know tonight are real for Victoria. I think he was soft. I think it was too complimentary about the Victorian Premier. And right now, that Belt and Road deal, which he said he's prepared to tear up, is still there and not torn up. Not torn up. So I think Scott Morrison's got some work to do to get back in Victorians' good books.
He does.
Luke, have a lovely weekend.
Thank you, Peter.